Okay, so get this. We're diving deep into invisibility cloaks today.
Oh, wow.
And no, I'm not talking about Harry Potter here. China's apparently making some serious progress with this technology. And it could completely change how we think about warfare.
That's interesting.
Yeah, our mission today is to try to figure out what these advancements could mean for the future battlefield, especially given all the tension in the South China Sea.
Right, yeah.
Our source material is an article from Popular Mechanics. It's titled, China Invented a New Invisibility Cloak. What does that mean for the future of warfare?
Okay.
The article lays out some pretty wild scenarios. Imagine fighter jets just vanishing from radar,
Wow.
making our current defenses completely useless. To help us break all this down, we've got our expert here to shed some light on the situation.
Well, it's really fascinating to see how stealth technology has evolved. We've moved on from traditional stealth planes like the F-35 that are designed to deflect radar. We're actually trying to achieve true invisibility now.
Like completely invisible.
Yeah, but even those advanced stealth planes like that F-35 still have weaknesses.
Right, because radar technology is always improving too.
Exactly. Systems like Russia's Nebo-M radar can actually detect stealth planes from hundreds of miles away.
Really?
Yeah, and it uses these longer wavelengths that are a lot harder for those planes to avoid.
Hmm.
And then you've got China's efforts to counter stealth technology, like their satellite-based radar system that can pick up even the smallest refractions from stealth planes. So it basically negates their advantage.
So it sounds like it's this constant back and forth, right? Both sides are always trying to outmaneuver each other when it comes to stealth.
Yeah, absolutely. And this push for invisibility cloak technology is kind of the next step in that evolution.
Makes sense. This new cloak that China has been working on is specifically for drones, right? What's the story there?
Well, researchers at Zhejiang University have developed what they call an aero-amphibious cloak, and it's designed just for drones.
Aero-amphibious. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it does.
What does that even mean?
So basically it means that this cloak can work in the air, on land, and even underwater.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It uses AI and a network of sensors to analyze incoming radar waves. And then it dynamically adjusts these tiny structures on its surface to bend those waves around the drone, essentially making it invisible in real time.
So they've actually been able to test this.
Yeah, they've done successful indoor tests. And in these tests, the cloaked drone was practically undetectable. It blended in with the background much better than uncloaked drones.
So this isn't just some theory. It's an actual working prototype.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so significant.
So what does this mean for potential conflicts then? Especially considering China's, increasingly assertive stance in the South China Sea.
Well, just think about a scenario involving Taiwan. If China were to equip their already large drone fleet with these cloaks, they could potentially infiltrate Taiwan's airspace, completely undetected.
So they could basically just appear out of thin air.
Pretty much, yeah. And they could cripple Taiwan's defenses before they even knew what hit them.
That's a scary thought. It sounds like the rules of engagement could be totally rewritten.
Yeah, exactly. And this has major implications for the U.S. and its allies, too. Imagine facing an enemy that you can't even see. It would make a lot of our current defense systems useless.
Right, it's like fighting a ghost. This tech has the potential to change the entire balance of power globally. But how far along is it really? Are we talking about, invisible armies marching around tomorrow?
No, not quite. While it's promising, this invisibility cloak technology still has limitations. One of the biggest challenges is handling a wide range of radar frequencies at the same time.
Okay, so it's not foolproof yet.
Not yet. No technology really is. But that's not to say that it won't get there.
So it's not just China working on this, right? It's like a global race.
Absolutely. The U.S., Russia, and a lot of European nations are also investing heavily in developing their own invisibility cloak technologies.
I remember a few years ago, back in 2018, there were reports of China producing huge amounts of electromagnetic materials, potentially for their J-20 stealth fighter jet.
Right.
So they were already kind of laying the groundwork for this type of technology back then.
Yeah, it seems so.
And it goes beyond just drones and fighter jets. In the long term, think about the possibility of cloaking entire vehicles' equipment, even soldiers.
It's mind-blowing, really.
That brings up a whole other set of questions. What are the ethical implications of all this? How do you ensure transparency and accountability when actions can be carried out by, unseen actors?
You're right. You're hitting on a really crucial point here. This invisibility cloak technology presents some very real ethical and strategic challenges for us.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so for our listener today, what are the key takeaways they should be walking away with from this part of our deep dive?
Well, first, invisibility cloaks are not just science fiction anymore. They're quickly becoming a reality with potentially huge implications for warfare. Second, China's advancements in this area, especially their AI-powered drone cloak, represent a major turning point in military technology. And finally, the future of warfare might very well be defined by these unseen actors, raising all sorts of new challenges and dilemmas for the world to grapple with.
We've covered a lot of ground so far. Join us for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll explore the potential countermeasures to this invisibility technology, and we'll delve deeper into the global race to master the art of disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've established that invisibility cloaks are a real thing, and they're a rapidly developing threat that could completely change how wars are fought.
Right.
But the big question is, how do we fight back against something we can't see?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But the good news is that there are a few different approaches being explored right now to counter this technology.
Okay.
One of those is focusing on advancing radar technology itself.
We talked before about how some radar systems are already using longer wavelengths, the ones that are harder for those stealth planes to evade.
Exactly.
Could we use those same principles against these invisibility cloaks?
Absolutely. Developing radar systems that operate across a wider spectrum of frequencies, including those longer wavelengths, could make it a lot harder for cloaks to hide objects completely. Think of it like casting a wider net to catch those signals that the cloak might miss.
So instead of trying to see the cloaked object directly, we're looking for the imperfections in the cloak itself, those places where it fails to bend or absorb the radar waves.
Exactly. And there's another really interesting area of research, quantum radar.
Quantum radar. That sounds pretty high-tech.
It is. It uses the principles of quantum entanglement to detect objects.
Yeah.
And it does so with incredible accuracy. Without getting too deep into the physics of it all, it basically allows us to create a connection between two particles, no matter how far apart they are.
So we're talking about spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, kind of. So if we send out one of these entangled particles as part of the radar signal, and we keep the other one, we can get information about the object, even if it's trying to hide.
So we're basically using quantum mechanics to see what's hidden.
Precisely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But are there any simpler, more immediate countermeasures we could use?
Yeah, there are a few tactical approaches. They focus on the limitations of current cloaking technology, like how it struggles to handle a wide range of radar frequencies at the same time.
Right, we talked about that.
So if we developed radar systems that emit multiple frequencies all at once, it could overload the cloak and make the object detectable.
So we're kind of like throwing too much information at the cloak so it can't keep up.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Another tactic is to think about the environment itself, because even the most advanced invisibility cloaks have to blend in with their surroundings to work.
So we could maybe exploit some environmental vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Things like sudden temperature changes or a spike in humidity could disrupt the cloak's effectiveness and make the object visible.
It's like we could use the weather as a weapon.
In a way, yeah.
So countering these invisibility cloaks isn't just about developing new technologies. It's about adapting our tactics and strategies.
You got it.
In what ways would we need to adapt?
Well, for one, we can't just rely on what we can see anymore. We need new ways to detect and track enemy movements, even if they're invisible.
So a more data-driven approach to warfare.
Exactly. We'll need to use sensors, data analysis, even artificial intelligence, to identify patterns and anomalies that could indicate the presence of a cloaked object.
Learning to see the unseen.
That's it.
But how do we prepare soldiers to fight an enemy they can't see? That's got to be a huge psychological challenge.
It is. The psychological impact of facing an invisible enemy is real. Fear and uncertainty are powerful weapons. Training soldiers to operate in an environment where they can't always see the threat will be crucial.
So it's like a new form of psychological warfare, where the unseen is even more intimidating than the seen.
Exactly. The mental game is going to be even more important.
Yeah. We've talked about countermeasures and the need to change our tactics. But this isn't just a technological and tactical challenge, is it? It's a global competition. Who's winning this race to master invisibility technology?
Well, that's a great question. China is making headlines with their drone cloak, but they're not the only ones.
Right. We mentioned that the U.S., Russia, and others are all investing heavily in this too. Is anyone else making significant progress?
Well, the research is moving quickly. It's important to remember that back in 2013, scientists at the University of Texas announced that they'd created an invisibility cloak, although it only worked against microwave light.
So even back then, the groundwork was being laid.
Yeah, and that work has continued and expanded. The U.S. and its allies are working hard to counter whatever advantage China might have. The race is on, and it's really hard to say who's going to win.
With so many players involved, What are the implications of this for global power dynamics?
That's where things get really serious. Whoever masters this technology first could have a huge military advantage, one that could completely reshape the balance of power. The ramifications extend far beyond just battlefield tactics.
It's like we're on the verge of a new chapter in military history.
It feels that way, doesn't it? We're moving towards an era where wars could be dominated by invisible forces, and the rules of engagement are changing right in front of us.
We've covered a lot here. Countermeasures, new strategies, the global race to control invisibility. But where does all this leave our listener? What are the main takeaways from this part of our deep dive?
The main takeaway is this: invisibility technology is a game changer, and we're just beginning to understand its impact on warfare. The need for countermeasures and new strategies is urgent. We need to stay vigilant and invest in research, and prepare for a future where the enemy might be hiding right in front of us.
A lot to think about, for sure. Join us for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the broader implications of this technology, the ethical concerns, the potential for misuse, and what it all means for the future of warfare and international relations. Okay, so we've talked about the countermeasures and, the global race to develop this invisibility tech.
Right.
But now I want to step back and look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
This is about way more than just military strategy at this point, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
This tech could completely change how we view warfare conflict, even national security as a whole.
Yeah, you're right. It raises some really big questions, ones that go way beyond the battlefield. We're talking about things like ethics, international law, even the very idea of trust and verification in a world where, seeing might not be believing anymore.
It's like we're entering this new age of uncertainty, where it's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Exactly, and that uncertainty could lead to more mistrust and paranoia globally, which could make diplomacy and resolving conflicts even harder.
Right, because if you can't even be sure if what you're seeing is real, how can you prevent someone from misusing this technology?
Right, and how do you make sure there's transparency and accountability when actions could be taken by people or things that we can't even detect?
The potential for misuse is a huge concern for me.
Right.
Like espionage, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Invisible drones or spies being used for surveillance or covert operations.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And it's a scary one. Invisibility technology could give a huge advantage to anyone trying to, gather intelligence or carry out secret missions.
Right.
And it would make it incredibly hard to figure out who's responsible for attacks or actions, which could lead to even more tension and escalate conflicts that are already happening.
So this could actually cause more conflicts.
Potentially, yeah.
So it's not just about changing military tactics then. This could erode trust on a global scale.
That's a real concern. And that's why it's so important to talk about this now. While this technology is still fairly new, we need to start figuring out ethical guidelines, international agreements, safeguards to prevent people from abusing this invisibility technology.
It seems like this is one of those technologies that could be really good or really bad, depending on, how we use it.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword. Will we use it responsibly for peace and to make things better? Or will it become another way to destroy things? That's the question we need to be asking ourselves.
It's a question for everyone to think about, not just governments and military leaders.
Right.
This needs to be a global conversation with scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and everyday people all involved.
I agree completely. We all have a stake in this.
We can't just sit back and let technology decide what our future is going to be. We need to be active in shaping it.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility to guide how this technology is developed and used in a way that actually benefits humanity.
So for our listener out there, I'll leave you with this. What role do you think you can play in making sure that invisibility technology is used ethically and responsibly? It might feel like something out of a movie, but this is the reality we live in now, and we all have a responsibility to deal with it.
We need to stay informed, ask the tough questions, and hold our leaders accountable for the decisions they make about this powerful technology.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into invisibility cloaks. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking conversation.
It really has, and it's one that needs to continue.
It does. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.